What It Means to Belong to the Right is an essay by Julius Evola that can be found in A Handbook for Right-Wing Youth, which is a collection of Evola's essays assembled by Hungarian traditionalists. Published in 1973, this particular essay answers the question of what defines the right. It tackles the question of what positive positions does the right hold, in addition to stating what the right ought to be against. In typical Evolian fashion, the essay begins with an acknowledgement that society is already in decline. Evola writes that right and left are designations which refer to an already crisis-ridden political society. They did not exist in traditional regimes, at any rate, not according to the meanings currently assigned to them. Furthermore, Evola recognizes the origin of the terms left and right as being from the French Revolution. As we know, the revolutionaries sat on the left side of the assembly, and the pro-monarchy forces sat on the right. Evola goes on to note that the term right acquires different meanings according to one's plane of reference. The economic right, for example, is based on capitalism and is antithetical to socialism and Marxism. The political right has historically been associated with support for the church and the institution of monarchy, at least until after the First World War. However, when Evola uses the term right, he does not mean it in either of these aforementioned senses. When Evola speaks of the right in this essay, he uses the term to denote a spiritual orientation and worldview. For Evola, a right-wing stance is necessarily anti-collectivist, anti-plebeian, and aristocratic. Its positive counterpart is thus to be found in the affirmation of the ideal of a well-structured, organic, and hierarchical state, governed by a principle of authority. Moreover, in addition to being opposed to democracy, socialism, and egalitarianism, for Evola, being a man of the right means upholding tradition as a set of spiritual, aristocratic, and martial values. He strives to live a noble and heroic life in service to a natural hierarchy, with the divine at the top of this natural order. Having come to properly understand what Evola means by the right, we can now see why an authentic right-wing worldview is opposed to both the so-called progressives and what Evola labels as static conservatism. With regards to the former, Evola quips that progressivism is a whim alien to any right-wing stance. This is because the right conceives of what the left calls progress, not as genuine improvement, but rather as degradation. For example, the left's emphasis on materialism leads to an erosion of higher spiritual values. The left's emphasis on sexual liberation leads to the erosion of the family and unchecked promiscuity. The left's emphasis on equality leads to oikophobia, the hatred of one's own race, and the loss of a civilization on the altar of diversity. Thus, when a left-winger of any variety uses the term progress, what they really are referring to is decline. They are not working to create a more perfect society, but rather are subverting it by reorienting it away from tradition. In addition to being opposed to the ilk that call themselves progressives, the right ought to also be opposed to what Evola calls static conservatism. According to Evola, what the claim that the right must not be characterized by static conservatism means is that certain values and underlying ideas must indeed be there as a firm foundation, but must be expressed in different ways, in keeping with the times, so as not to let oneself be overtaken by them. This enables one to avoid being left behind and to grasp, govern, and absorb anything that may emerge as the context changes. Moreover, Evola also writes, the rejection of static conservatism in such terms does not concern the sphere of principles. For the man of the right, principles always constitute a solid foundation, a bedrock in the face of change and contingency. Here, the catchword must always be counter-revolution. If we like, we may adopt the only apparently paradoxical formula of conservative revolution. What Evola is saying in these two excerpts is that the right can be called conservative insofar as the right is always rooted in the principles of tradition. This, of course, presupposes that there is anything worth preserving. If not, the right should not be committed to preserving the victories of the left. Ergo, he opposes static conservatism, or conservatism for conservatism's sake, which in America fights to preserve things like the Civil Rights Act of 1964. By understanding this, we can see what he means by writing that the term conservative revolution is only apparently paradoxical. This is because, as Evola puts so succinctly in the second to last paragraph, indeed, in the conditions of crisis and subversion, nothing has a more revolutionary character than the recovery of such traditional values. A final piece of the essay which bears mentioning is that Evola argues that dictatorial governments are incongruent with an authentically right-wing disposition, on the grounds that they are built on populist sentiments. This objection to fascism is elaborated on in his book, A Critique of Fascism from the Right. But in short, Evola believes that fascistic governments are tainted by modernity, arise from the demos rather than an aristocracy, are collectivist, and fail to sufficiently orient themselves toward the divine. As a side note, this is also why, when Evola referred to himself as a super-fascist, he meant the word super as a synonym for beyond. Thus, this very often misunderstood descriptor characterizes him as beyond fascism. Evola believed that the office of dictator did have a place, but should only be thought of as it was in Roman times, namely, a transiently valid, temporary office instituted only in times of emergency under contingent and provisional terms. Personally, I object to this part of the essay. I do not agree with Evola on the subjects of fascism and National Socialism, for many different reasons. However, in the interest of protecting my channel from the wrath of Raja Mohan, I must digress. In conclusion, What It Means to Belong to the Right is a useful read for any man or woman of the right on the grounds that it puts forth a positive case for what the right wing believes. Too often, right-wingers state what they are against, but do not state what they are actually for. Evola attempts to correct that in a brief, easy-to-comprehend manner within this essay. Furthermore, he dispenses with the notion of being economically right-wing and socially liberal rather quickly, and as a result, does not get bogged down in the trite normicon talking points about taxes and the free market. Instead, Evola addresses the core of what the right wing is in a profound way, much to the chagrin of the contemptible neoconservative punditry. Rather than advocate for their feckless and neutered brand of conservatism, Evola gives a credo for right-wing youth. Thus, to paraphrase Evola, in conditions of crisis and subversion, nothing has a more revolutionary character than the recovery of traditional values.